Welcome to Conversations with. My name is Shaley Hoogendoorn, and I live with bipolar 2 disorder. Sharing with others is healing, both individually and collectively. Sharing our stories will educate others, bring more understanding, shed more light, and smash more stigma. Our voices need to be heard. Our stories aren't over yet. This is Bipolar. Hi everyone, welcome back to This is Bipolar. If this is your first time, I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn. I'm a wife, a mom, a teacher. I live with bipolar 2 disorder. I live on the unceded and traditional territory of the Kaci and Coquitlam people, which is also known as Port Coquitlam, Vancouver, Canada. And so I'm really excited because I have a guest here today that I feel like I already know. I interact with him online since the beginning, and I know his wife from online as well. So it's very exciting that we're actually going to hang out together. So Markku, I would love if you would just tell us a little introduction about yourself.
Thank you, Shaley. I'm so excited to be here. I go on Instagram every day to This is Bipolar and laugh. One of my happy spots.
Yay!
You have the best facial expressions ever. So my name's Markku Kostamo, and I live in South Surrey, White Rock, on the Little Camel River, and I have two daughters and a wife, Leah, and we just love being in this part of the world. And it's known as the Tatloo River by the Semiahmoo First Nations.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. And you do, tell me what you do for your work and for fun.
I'm a social entrepreneur. So I've been in the nonprofit space for 20 plus years as an executive director. And I currently work as the director of development for Sanctuary Mental Health. And then I have a little agency on the side helping nonprofits grow called Kaci. So and I love anything outdoors. So on the water, on the snow, in the woods. And we have a little dog called Blue who comes with us.
What kind of dog?
He's a Australian Labradoodle.
Oh, I have a little one. He's a Cavapoo. He's got Cavalier miniature poodle.
Yeah.
Max. You'll probably see him on Instagram.
Blue was supposed to be little, but he's about 50 pounds.
Oh, surprise. Oh,
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, welcome.
Thank
I
you,
would just like to dive in. I'm so curious. When did you notice, or did you as a child or a teenager or young adult, that something was different or something was going on? I'd love to hear about that.
You know what? It gets mixed up because I had childhood trauma. I went to boarding school as a 6-year-old. And so
wow.
I just for 6 months, but I lived this depression. I experienced depression, significant depression and abandonment trauma. And that kind of linked to, this experiencing depression throughout my life. So initially in my 20s, I was diagnosed with depression and was on medication for 20 years.
Wow.
With depression.
Yeah.
So, but as I look back, it's like, it was bipolar disorder in the early stages of that. And I just was misdiagnosed for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, I hear you. Same. I'm not very good with stats, but somebody was telling me, I think it was like average between like 6 and 10 years, especially for bipolar 2 disorder. Did you have bipolar 2, bipolar 1?
I'm diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder.
1 disorder. Yeah. And because it's so true, we go for the help when we're depressed, right? Because it's terrible. And not that the other side isn't terrible, but I don't know about you, but did you think that the times you weren't, like, did you have kind of a cycle through the year, or was it random for you?
Oh, no, total cycle, maybe like 3 or 4 cycles a year.
Okay.
So I would be hypomanic And I thought that hypomanic Markku was like the real guy.
Yes.
Yes, it's like there's that depressed guy. He's not the real guy. The real guy's the hypomanic guy that gets so much done, and like everyone's like patting me on the back and saying, I can't believe how much work you get done. You're working like 2 people. And in the meantime, there's like, but it's kind of hard to work with you. You're kind of like a jerk sometimes.
Oh, yes, I hear you.
Or maybe a lot of the time. So, yeah. So it was definitely a journey.
Yeah, yeah. And so leading into that, so that when you thought you were like, I so relate to that. I thought that was the real Shaley. And it's like, oh, you just got to get through this and you'll get back to it. And you have such, I had such confidence. And then I was really blinded to how it was affecting folks around me for a lot of time. And you're absolutely right. The whole getting stuff done, right? And you're like, I always tell people that, might be curious if someone in their life might live with bipolar disorder, or to watch out for their friends. If they're like you said, like 2 people, maybe look into that, because they might not be sleeping like ever. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And you get compliments. I remember, like, I'd redo my entire kitchen, and I had littles, like even when I had the little kids, they're like, I can't believe you have so much energy. And I just thought I was like, maybe just like super awesome, which I am, I guess, but not that.
You are. You are awesome.
And
I've been
then,
watching you.
oh, thank you. You're so kind. I'm curious, when you experience hypomania, what does that look like and feel like for you? Because some people that listen, they're trying to figure out if they are bipolar, or we have folks that are curious about people in their family. Can you describe what that feels like in your body and how you behave?
Yeah, I think for me, the hypomanic, I have a daily, I do a daily mood charting.
Yes.
So 5 is like normal,
Mm-hmm.
and 10 is like way off the charts in the hospital manic, and
Gotcha.
0 is in the hospital like suicidal, depression. So I try to stay in the like what I would say most people stay in, the 4 to 6 range.
Yeah.
When I'm hitting a 7, I am overworking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working so much that I'm actually getting really tired because I'm so focused on work.
Yeah.
And I tend to have blinders on when it feels like I have I'm becoming very sort of like laser focused, and then the rest of the life kind of disappears, like housework or, connecting. Yeah, I'll connect. All of a sudden I'll start to connect with all kinds of people I never connect with, but I'm not connecting with like the important people in my life.
Yeah.
I'm becoming more irritable. I can feel like in my, like right here, I can feel this revving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are some of the symptoms. And
yeah, I love that you chart it. That's so important. And that's something, if you're listening and you're wondering, try and keep track somehow. I know when I'm hypomanic, I can't sit down, or I can't write in a journal, or those kind of things. So I would just start, like I would record on my phone, or I'd do something that was easy. But if you're looking, to get a diagnosis or to bring information to your doctor, that's like one of the most helpful things, because like we were talking about before, getting misdiagnosis, because we don't go when we're hypomanic, right? Because we think we're awesome. And I that's a perfect way to explain it. Blinders, right? I think sometimes people think, bipolar, or you're all over the place. But sometimes if it's like a good idea, it's like the only thing. It's like one or the other, to kind of, I'm like disoriented, disorganized sometimes in a project, or so laser focused that you're right. You ignore everybody. But it was really interesting. I really related to where you said, I contact a whole bunch of people, but not the important people. That just hit me because I'll look at my texts and I'll be like, oh, or I'll be like, oh my goodness, I saw something that reminded me of this girl in high school that I haven't talked to in 20 years, but I bet you she's on Facebook. And then then when I slowly start to come down, I have to like answer everybody that I've texted. I'm like, no. Does that happen to you when you
It
start
does.
to?
Well, not just answering everybody. It's like a bunch of small projects, or maybe sometimes bigger projects, extra projects. Even at work, it's like they're good things, but I've started too many things,
Yeah,
and I can't keep up with it all. So
yeah,
yeah. So I mean, that's like that cycle, um, and I've been better in recent years on managing that cycle.
yeah,
But this just the past few months, like
yeah.
I would say I'm between a 5 and a 6 right now.
Mhm.
But January and February, I was higher. I was like a 6+, maybe on
Mm.
verge of 7.
Yeah,
And I know that I impacted people. Like, and this has been, every time. I mean, it's never smooth. It's not predictable, right? So
yeah.
this time I went a little higher than I have been,
Hmm.
and it did impact some people,
Mm.
both in friendships and at work. So I feel so terrible afterwards. It's like, why? Like I could have caught that. So, but there's a kind of living in that, both like taking responsibility and then extending yourself grace, or
Yeah,
not not living in shame, but like this happens. Like
yeah,
I I live with bipolar 1 disorder,
yeah,
and this happens. This is bipolar.
yeah, yeah, right. Good title.
You caught that.
I loved it. Loved it. That is really interesting. I was having this conversation with my partner, my husband, because unfortunately, I hate saying it, but he's my person, so he gets the brunt of it, which really, really sucks. But I was talking to him sometime, and I'm always trying to figure out, like, I get stuck in this thought, trying to figure out like what is attainable, right? Because I'm always going to have episodes in some kind of way, and I've accepted that, right? That's a good thing for me. That isn't a hard thought for me. How do I work alongside? But I was thinking like, what, if I'm going to change like how I talk to him, or how I'm just like, even things that aren't a big deal, like my reactions, or like he just says like, I'm really intense, and then I think about it later and I'm like, I didn't really care about that thing, but it's just me. I'm really intense, and I know the bipolar disorder adds to it. But we were talking and I was like, I wonder what is attainable for me, because I think that at some point, because of the disorder, some things I need to be realistic, but yet not, but still, like you said, be a bit accountable. Because I was thinking like, so say we take another illness, right? That's not an invisible illness, that's not a mental illness. And it was like, say it was something hard, like maybe cancer or another illness, and you had a symptom, right? And then it wouldn't be your fault. You wouldn't, chances are, I don't know, but chances are you probably wouldn't think like, I'm doing something wrong if I was, dizzy or nauseous. Whereas when you have a mental illness, like when I'm irritable, or do you know what I mean? Or I'm angrier than usual, or I don't think before I speak, it's actually a symptom. But yet it's so attached to who we are. Do you ever think about that? What do you think about that?
That's a good question. And I think like I've used the analogy of type 1 diabetes
Yeah.
a fair bit, just because there's a lot of management that goes into that
Mhm.
illness, like self-care, and watching what you eat, and
Mhm.
charting your sugar levels. So
Right.
that for me, and I have dear friends that live with type 1 diabetes, and
Mm.
it's hard.
Yeah.
And they can become irritable as well, like on the sugar.
Right.
There can be
Yeah.
some kind of languishing of their mental health as well with some
Hmm.
of their symptoms. So I see that, and so I understand that these are symptoms. And yet, when we impact other people, there's responsibility that goes along with that. Like you still have, like, you
Yeah.
can't just shrug it off, right? You can't say, well, that was a symptom
Yeah.
when it impacts somebody. So then there's, repair,
Yeah.
uh, apology. And it's not, you can't, for that person who's been impacted, it's not enough to say
Right.
this is just a symptom. It's true, it is a symptom, but that, for the repair to happen, there needs to, like, I need to take responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's a both and.
Yeah.
There's a balance there. I think that
Yeah. Yeah.
what's important is what's happening inside us.
Right.
Like, the repair is important for the other person and for
Yeah.
us to live in, live in relational health.
Yeah.
That's important for us. But being able to, like, internally not go to the places of deep shame because of that. Because then that makes it even harder for us.
Right.
So to deal with our symptoms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's really powerful. It's true. It is really true because, and I know for me, pre-medication or pre-treatment, pre-diagnosis, it was very hard within a hypomanic episode to see that I was even hurting someone, right? Because it just seemed like, well, obviously I'm right.
yeah.
Obviously, like, what's wrong? Like, I didn't have that reflective capacity. And so I love that I have that now. Like, it's almost like baseline, right? Medication doesn't cure it, but I have more of a baseline to go with. And but it's also a both end, right? Because there's a lot more guilt, but I love what you said about not living in shame, right? There's that. And I think too, when people, and that's why I love when people tell me that they listen and they don't have bipolar disorder, but they love someone, because I think that's one of the most beautiful things that our people can do is learn about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'll tell my husband that, I'll know when I wake up and, like, I'm just like, the world is a dumpster fire. Everything sucks. Everybody sucks. Just no. And I'll know when I wake up, and some days I'll say, I'm going to try my best, but this is an extra grace required day. Just so you know. I'm curious. So you said that, so you were on the medication for 20 years, thinking that you just had depression. Two questions. Did it trigger a mania, the medication, or like, how did the diagnosis come to be? Like, walk me through right before and tell me about that. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, full-blown manic episodes are dramatic.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm totally happy to talk about it because of, I think, just in my advocacy and storytelling, I think the reality of our humanness and our human, like our experience, providing a kind of a little window to that to others is helpful. So yeah, so I definitely the medication, being on an SSRI is one of the worst things to be on if you have bipolar disorder, because it can definitely push you up. So I was on that. There was a extreme stressful incident that elevated, that created, like, it was an external incident that
Yep.
work related that created, I mean, it was completely out of this world, violence and that I think just got me up even higher. And then it becomes like this circular, almost self-fulfilling, because then when you're up, you start to have more conflict. So that's what happened with me, like with at work. And then I went on a great men's trip where I did the Bowerns, just in the middle of all that. I went
Wow.
to the Bowen Lakes and paddled. And after I've been reading books and going, one of the things you should avoid is like adventures. Like if
Yeah.
you're hypomanic,
Yeah.
like don't go do something really exciting.
Yeah.
You do the opposite, like what takes you down.
Yeah.
So I added this in, like, and that's like one of my favorite things is to have outdoor adventures.
That's the canoe and when you carry them from lake to lake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a 7-day canoe trip with guys, and the guys, like, they loved it because I was so hilarious and funny and full of life, but they also like, oh, we were so sad because we knew something was wrong.
Right.
And then I came back to work, and all the conflict started again. And I was doing highly entrepreneurial things that probably were good ideas, wrong time, wrong, high risk. I was very convincing, and then home life got harder and harder for my wife Leah. She really experienced the brunt of that. Like, it was, I started to uncharacteristically swear, bang doors with anger,
Yeah.
started smoking, like things that I didn't do normally.
Right.
And I live in community, so other people were on a farm with 6 other families, so everyone was kind of noticing something was going on. And I had the privilege of having a mentor who is just a really experienced psychologist, and he was tracking behind the scenes what was happening.
Wow.
So Leo would be checking in,
Yeah.
and so they were tracking what was happening.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point being someone suggested that maybe I had bipolar disorder, and I was like, no way. It totally freaked me out. It was
Yeah.
just like, no way. Like I said, I think my words are, that'll be so stigmatizing. I'm not gonna, like, my career will be done, and I'll be on lithium, and it's going to be so terrible. Like, so that was like this deep fear. Probably was an indication, like for me, it was like, oh, there's probably some truth to this.
Right.
And then on my 48th birthday, after the party, I was just working away on my laptop, sending, probably messages to about 100 people.
Wow. Yeah.
And someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, what are you doing here? I said, come on into the living room. And there was like 9 of my friends sitting in the living room.
Okay.
And I was like, they said, sit down. And I said, is this an intervention? And then I was like, I feel sick to my stomach. And not because I was like feeling bad about being ill, but it was this thing of like, okay, I'm out of control. Like, first of all, I am out of control.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I have no control now. They want to take me to the hospital.
Yeah.
I went totally willingly. But I think one of the things my mentor said to me afterwards, like after I've been in recovery, he said, I knew something was really wrong when you were like chatting away on the drive and telling jokes and laughing, and everybody else was like somber, sad, and quiet. But I did in the end. I mean, I didn't resist at all. But
wow. That's so interesting. It's so interesting when you kind of know something's wrong, but then seeing that must have been really impactful walking in the room. Or I remember a few people said to me, I didn't quite believe them, but I wasn't like all there. So then I wasn't like as offended as I would have been, like, you know what I mean? If I was, so it was almost like a protective layer. But I'm curious, I wonder why, and we probably don't know, but why you didn't resist. It's like deep down, maybe you knew or you wanted to feel different.
Yeah, actually, I had tried to go to a walking clinic with Leah 2 days before,
Okay,
um, but I was convinced that I had PTSD,
right.
not bipolar.
Yeah.
So I think and because I was still so persuasive,
Hmm.
uh, all the people around me who were caring for me, caring about me, wanted to make sure that I didn't pull the
Yes.
wool over the eyes of the medical team.
Right, because
So
we're very charming. I
yeah,
find when I'm hypomanic, I'm very charming, and I think that unfortunately I even brought it to my actual GP, and he was like, yeah, no, you're not, you couldn't be because of da 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 da, which put me behind 7 years of a diagnosis. Right, that's hard. So they were bringing you to the hospital? Yes.
ER, to the emergency room.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
what
And then,
happened?
well, then a psychiatrist did an assessment. He
Mhm.
kind of did a long interview.
Yeah,
Um, and then and they got some background info from my friends,
yeah,
kind of see the full context. So I think there was a lot more going on than I understood,
yeah,
knew. But I knew I was coming to stay. Like I wasn't
yeah,
leaving.
yeah.
Um, and so I did admit myself, the involuntary. I can't remember what it's called in BC, but
Yeah, yeah,
like basically I couldn't leave. Like I
yeah,
signed and basically said I couldn't leave till I was.
yeah. Till you had permission or till
Yeah,
they knew
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's I went to Emerge as well. And they did the same thing, like they took Rob separate. And I actually think that even if you're talking to like trying to get a diagnosis, I know there's someone in my family right now that it's been very hard for them. And I just can't understand why the doctor hasn't talked to people around them. Right, because
yeah,
when you're in it, you can't see what, like, you need that. So my friends that are going, please bring someone with you that knows you, and that's really helpful. And I remember, like, I too wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave until someone told me what was wrong, right? But they didn't admit me. I went to, you've probably heard in the other episode, this place called Crest, which is like a short stay treatment center,
hmm,
and
yeah.
found out there. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, if you're willing to talk about it, what is it like? What is it like here in Canada or at that specific hospital? What was it like for you? Do you remember?
I do remember. There's a lot of things that I don't remember. I remember the hospital pretty well. But before, I mean, it's interesting, like all that kind of the wake that I created for
Yeah.
people. So, so I had all these people living in my wake, the big
Yeah.
waves that I created,
Yeah.
that I didn't know. It's kind of like, so I didn't remember all of that. Like I didn't remember all of that, but I do remember the hospital pretty well. And the first thing I remember is actually, I'm not one of them. That was like, that's the first thing I remember thinking, I'm not one of these people.
Right.
Like, why am I here? I'm so well in comparison. Uh,
Right.
so that was my first, like this arrogant kind
Mhm.
of perspective. And it took me about 3 days, like of hearing people's stories,
Mm.
hearing other people who were hypomanic or manic, or you know, telling their stories and telling me what, it's like, oh yeah, like I started to identify, and then it's just like, yeah, I get it.
Mm.
I am one of them. I am. these are my people. I'm here. And, and I was still up. So once I got, I did it. I was a very good patient. So because I knew it gave me privileges.
Okay, smart.
So then I got out, like I got day passes but I'd go to the grocery store and come back with like watermelons and like cut up watermelons with the little plastic knife to share.
Oh,
Like
right.
I was in like, these are my people. I'm going to build community here. But I think that's the big experience for me was I'm not one of these people. And that transition from arrogance to humility to I am one of these people and I need to be here to get the help that I need.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah, I feel like we're kindred spirits. When I went to the other place, I like organized, like I would put notes under the doors and organize to watch TV together, or like I wanted to, and it was the instant friendship, right? Because there's nothing to hide. We all know we're there for something, so it's just stripped back. And I just found that, of course it was an experience, I don't wish upon people, but it was really beautiful, and it really showed me like, oh wow, if I could go into other community spaces and just be this unmasked and honest. I treasure that part. And it was really interesting because one of the guys that was there, we really hit it off. We were both 90s kids. We were like, we had, a lot of fun together. And I saw him like 12 or 13 years later. And it was so cool to just see each other. And we were both, we're both treated. So we're both doing, fairly well as you can be. And it was, it was just such a reminder of community.
How was that for him to see you?
Yeah, I didn't recognize him at first because he was a bit younger than me, and he had like changed. He like had different hair, and he had a whole bunch of piercings that he didn't have before. But I kind of looked, but because I do the podcast and I'm a substitute teacher and I used to do a lot of leadership roles at my old church, a lot of people, like my face is kind of like, it sounds so dumb, but like known a little bit. So I always smile back like I know them too, because I probably do. just to be safe, or I might have taught them years ago, or I don't know. So I'm smiling back, but yet there's some familiarity. And then he came up to me, and as soon as I heard his voice, I was like, and it was really, really exciting. I'm curious if there was people around us, because we were like, remember when we were here? I can imagine that we were pretty loud, but it was like just beautiful to just be able to talk about that, and when different worlds collide. So how long were you there?
So I was hospitalized twice.
Okay.
So first time I was there for 10 days.
Yeah.
But I was nowhere near, like I was really high. So even though they were using, significant drugs, meds, I was high for like another 8 weeks probably.
Wow. Yeah. And did you have to wean off because I had to wean off the antidepressant to be able to, it takes time.
Yeah, it does. And that first round of meds that I was on, and when you go so high, the opposite happens.
Yeah.
You go so low, like a free fall.
Yeah. Especially
in that first year where you're trying to figure out the meds. And so my manic episode was in June, July, August.
Yeah.
And then I was on significant heavy meds that I call the hammer.
Good way to describe it. Yep.
It's still, I mean, my psychiatrist I have it as a pill in the pocket, this med, in case. But it is a hammer, like it works.
Yeah.
But I was on it for 9 months and I was a zombie.
Yeah.
I can't remember very much of that time. And I went so, suicidal ideation. I became suicidal and then was hospitalized
Yeah. For the opposite.
for
Yeah.
the opposite.
Wow.
And that, I mean, I needed to be in the hospital to be safe
Oh, yes. Yeah.
at that point. And I mean, that was a completely different experience.
Wow. So
So
during that time, were you off work? Did you
I was on sick leave.
Okay.
I was on
Yeah.
sick leave the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for a while afterwards too. So I think that those two events took basically 15 months of my life kind of
Wow.
wrapped up in that, like either the manic episode or the really low depression with suicidality and significant
Yeah.
issues there around just risk and yeah. So
Wow.
that was so that was, and so as you reflect on that time, it's like a baby bipolar person,
Mm,
like in my understanding and knowledge, like
right.
I just had no, and like I look back now, um and I think about oh, but the amount I've learned, and it's such a gift to be, I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but I can say that I'm in recovery. Um, and so if there's hope for me on this journey, I think there's hope for others.
Yeah.
And to actually live with bipolar disorder in such a way that that we can say we're in recovery. We are,
Yeah.
we can live well.
Yeah. I love that. I love that, in recovery, right? Because it's accepting that this is something that we live with and live
Yeah.
alongside. And we have, and yeah, I have a hard time, with, because some people, I get a lot of books sent to me, and there's a lot of ones that talk about like recovered or healed. And that's a really uncomfortable space for me, because I'm just like, and being a woman of faith, I do believe, in some miracles, but the chances are I'm going to live with this. And so I need to, instead of fighting it, live alongside it. And it's interesting. You went through the 15 months. Afterwards, did you read a lot or try to learn? Or, because I know for me at the beginning, I couldn't look it up. I listened to therapists and I had a team. It's almost like I could only take in what I could handle, right? Like I could only, and I know there wasn't like as much information out there. Like there wasn't, I was barely on Facebook then, like it was new,
Yeah.
right? And so there wasn't a ton, but I couldn't do it. And then when I did, I found it was like all so much medical stuff. And I mean, that's why I started this, right? Because I wanted to see someone that was like, okay, but still had the same illness as me, right? Like, yes, still struggling, but like you said, like it's not a sentence that everything's over. And I probably get a couple messages a month, like, oh, tell me my life's not over. Tell me that I can, do this or that. And I can't tell you what you can do because of the severities, et cetera. But I can tell you that, that it isn't over. Right.
Yeah.
So did you look into it right away? Did you learn over the years? How was your next couple years after you started to stabilize with meds?
Oh, well, I kind of went overboard.
Okay.
I'm like Mr. Research guy.
Are you?
So I think I've probably, like, if you look at my Kindle, I probably have like 50 books on bipolar disorder, at least.
Wow.
That I've read. Like,
Yeah.
why do you, Leah keeps saying, why do you need to read so many books? Like,
Yeah.
Like one good one would probably do it, maybe, or two. So, so I did, but I'm not sure how helpful in that first year it
Mm,
was. I,
right.
like the head knowledge is not like the more I learn, the more I'm like, actually head knowledge is not necessary. I mean, you need the basics,
Yeah.
but it's everything that's embodied.
Mm,
I find helpful.
yeah.
I find like embodied therapy, something that's somatic,
Hmm.
so helpful for my emotional regulation. Go outside and walk. I find that helpful.
Yeah.
I find embodied listening because I've had a real struggle attuning to people. Um,
Yeah.
but once I've learned even a little bit about embodied listening, and in the last 18 months, it's like, where was this all my life? Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's simply embodied listening is simply like, what am I feeling in my body when someone is saying something? Or, and all of a sudden, it's like the light bulb has gone off. Like
Yeah.
or on. I can I can relate to this person now, or I can relate to my own feelings and emotions, not be dissociated from it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like my own like emotional regulation because I'm more embodied and feeling and listening to my body.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all the reading is great. It's good, but it's nothing compared to like the practice of embodiment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
For those that aren't familiar, tell us what you mean by embodiment and somatic.
so embodiment is focusing, feeling, sensing in your body,
Yeah.
sensing your feelings, sensing whatever you're feeling with your body. Like, so
Yeah.
it could be emotions, it could even just be like the simplicity of listening to either pain in your body or,
Yeah.
and sometimes when we have blinders on, we don't even listen to, like, I have a sore back and I'm not doing anything about it. Or,
Yeah.
so it's just listening to your body, but then listening to others and what they're saying and what it stirs up in your senses. Like it could be like, when you're sharing about, your journey and as you came out, and with bipolar disorder and start, in your podcast listening, I would feel this anxiety I would
Mhm.
feel, well, I didn't know it was anxiety at first. What I felt in my stomach was like this, like butterflies and like clenching and,
Mm.
oh, that's anxiety. I'm feeling anxious for Shaley, just as she's telling
Oh,
the story. Uh, so that in a way is like
yeah.
an embodied kind of listening, maybe, even though we weren't in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. So, and then just staying attuning to your body. Um, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so interesting. I'm like almost frustrated